What is up, boys and girls? Londrick here, and now I'm back, and yeah, we're back. Londrick's Fave has made us return after a little bit of an absence. So, yeah, basically, I did it before the G1s, and then I just got busy, really. I mean, the G1s was so thick and fast. There were so many shows to do and keep up with that I was busy doing that. Then, obviously, at the same time, we had SummerSlam and then NXT TakeOver weekend. Then, recently, we had that weekend with TakeOver Cardiff, All Out and Royal Quest all on the same show. But the rest of the schedule's calmed down a little bit now. There's not going to be so many shows coming up over the next few weeks. So let's get back into it. Let's get back into doing some Fave Fives. Not sure how often I'll do it, just like when I can and when I feel like doing it, to be honest with you. Probably won't be every week, maybe every other week, something like that. I'm not sure. Just when I have a good topic to talk about, really. And this topic, really, because of this weekend's pay-per-view, do we really Clash the Champions? Well, where did the name Clash of Champions originate from? Originated from a classic show called Clash of the Champions back in WCW, NWA. So what the Clash of the Champions was a 2-hour free television show on TBS, aired on whatever night it aired. And it ran from 1988 till 1997. I believe in total there was about 35 or 36 Clash of the Champions. So we're going to go for 5 matches of this era. I mean, there's some great matches on this show, which will be reflected in this list. So let's get down to it. Coming in number 5, and we're going to start fairly late into the Clash era. Wait until the mid-1990s. Clash of the Champions 28. August 1994 for the United States Championship. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Stunning Steve Austin. So by 1994 the Clash format was starting to get phased out a little bit. At the time, pay-per-views were becoming a more bigger thing throughout the 1990s. And eventually in 95, 96 we were getting monthly pay-per-views. But WCW already started expanding the pay-per-views in 1993 and 1994, and because of stuff like Saturday Night and other TV shows, and then later on in 1995 launching WCW Nitro, the Clash of the Champions thing started getting phased out. For this until 1997 we were getting less clashes. So this is one of the last really good clashes in August of 1994. Now this is a really interesting time of the company, because it was finally starting to get some momentum after years of being distant set into the WWF. There was a sense that WCW were maybe catching up a little bit. They signed Hulk Hogan that summer, did the Great American Bash at the Beach in July, which gave WCW's highest ever buy rate. And at that time was the first ever WCW pay-per-view to beat a WWE pay-per-view in the same time frame. Because WCW Bash at the Beach beat King of the Ring 1994. And yeah, obviously with Hulk Hogan, a lot of eyeballs came on the product and all that. And although admittedly when Hogan and his crew all came in, the product did take a bit of a dip. Business wise though, definitely improved. And then a year later, the launch of WCW Nitro. And then this little thing called the Monday Night War happened. But in 1994, some of the old WCW favourites were still around, notably Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, who was a veteran by this point, been around the business a long time, and as a matter of fact was close to the end of his career, because I believe it was this match which caused a big back injury that ultimately forced Steamboat to retire. He never wrestled for 15 years after that, and he was feuding with a young guy by the name of Stunning Steve Austin. Steve Austin, that's a familiar name, isn't it? You might have heard of that guy called Steve Austin. So at this point, Austin had been in WCW for about 3 years. Never quite broke through at the top, but it's hard. You can't really say WCW ever really buried Austin. I mean, he came in right away, became the television champion, had a long run of that belt, was a part of the Dangerous Alliance, did pretty well there. Probably his most famous thing in WCW was the Hollywood's Blondes run with Brian Pillman in 1993. And that match between Hollywood's Blondes versus Ric Flair and Arn Anderson was definitely considered for this list, but didn't quite make it. And disappointingly, the Blondes split up in late 1993. And Austin went on his own, and then he was eventually the United States champion. So I think on the surface, 1994, Austin was in a pretty good spot. I mean, his momentum had grown. He was now United States champion. But then after that, it just didn't really go too well. And he lost the title of Jim Duggan at Fall Brawl. Shut it down the card, got injured, then fired. Then eventually went to WWF, and well, I think it's fair to say Austin did all right for himself in the WWF, didn't he? But yeah, this is probably one of the best feuds that was going on at the time. Ricky Steamboat versus Steve Austin. I mean, Ricky Steamboat, the ultimate babyface. Steamboat, honestly, just one of the greatest baby faces of all time. He was a baby face in his entire career. And Austin was a great heel at the time, US champion. And this was an awesome match. I mean, this was an absolutely fantastic match because pre-1997 neck injury, Austin was pretty much an awesome worker. He did a lot of bumps and all that and just was great in the ring. I mean, he still was great in the ring after his injury, but his style was totally different. He'd toned it down to a brawling style and all that, but pre-neck injury, Austin was absolutely awesome. And even in his early 40s, Ricky Steamboat was still the fucking man. I mean, it's weird. You always wonder what would happen to Steamboat had he not been forced to retire in 1994. I mean, he was still pretty awesome. Obviously, maybe when the wrestling got edgier and that in the 1990s, maybe the character wasn't as good anymore. But who knows what had happened in Ricky Steamboat in the Monday Night War era? Who knows? But yeah, this is just a fantastic back and forth match. Great wrestling match on this show. Definitely one of the best matches of Clash of Champions history. One of the best United States Championship matches in history. Just two great workers going out and then giving it their all, and then a great result as well. Ricky Steamboat defeats Steve Austin in this match to regain the US title. And of course, this is obviously the famous match with Ricky Steamboat hurting his back in this match. I mean, I believe it happened when they were both perched on the top rope. Then Austin pushes Steamboat off the top rope. Steamboat kind of lands in a sitting position, and I guess that fucked his spine up. And then, because this was going to lead to a big rematch at Fall Brawl, and I guess which would have been the blow off to the rivalry. Because prior to this, he had a great match at Bash at the Beach as well. So I guess that match was going to be a big one. Then, but obviously Steamboat couldn't do that match, and Austin was awarded the US title again. So when I think of Austin in WCW, I really think of two things. In general, the Hollywood Blondes were with Brian Pillman, and this match right here, I mean, is a match that's probably, apart from the War Games match which he was a part of, but you can say he was 110 for that match. I mean, so as far as one-on-one singles matches, is definitely the best Austin match you'll probably find pre-Stone Cold Steve Austin. And like I say, the last big match of Ricky Steamboat's career until 2009, so definitely check this one out if you haven't seen it. Coming at number 4, and we're actually sticking with Ricky Steamboat, but we're going back 3 years prior to December 1991 for the WCW World Tag Team Championships. The Enforcers, Arn Anderson, Larry Zbyszko versus Dustin Rhodes and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And part of what made this match so awesome was the huge surprise factor, which I'll explain in a minute. And in general, just an absolutely amazing tag team match. I mean, it's funny we're talking about Dustin Rhodes in 1991, and here we are in 2019, and Dustin Rhodes had one of the most awesome matches this year, Double or Nothing with Cody. But back in 1991, Dustin Rhodes was a young guy. He was very early 20s. Actually had a brief run in the WWF in 1990, early 1991, most famously teaming with his dad Dusty Rhodes against Ted DiBiase and Virgil at Royal Rumble 1991. But then when Dusty went back to the WCW to become the booker, he took his son Dustin with him, and allegedly what Vince McMahon said to Dustin, "I'll let you go down there, get some experience, let your dad get you over, then later on I'll take you back." And then that's kind of what happened when Dustin found his way back to the WWF later on, in 1995, became Goldust, and well, the rest is history really. But in 1991, Dusty Rhodes was that young baby face at the time. He was a young, athletic, good looking second generation. Character-wise, probably a bit generic. I mean, obviously, he kind of had the dusty look with the blonde hair, the tights, cowboy-style boots and all that. He's calling himself the Natural, which was a pretty apt nickname because really he's just a natural wrestler. I mean, really good athlete, really good performer. I mean, you look at some of Dustin's work in the early 90s and probably in-ring wise is probably some of his best stuff. Then he got into a tag team with Barry Windham, which was just a great idea at the time because obviously Barry Windham, that veteran, that great worker, experienced in tag teams, could teach Dustin Rhodes along the way, and then they were on the way to being a good tag team. Now, this match was actually scheduled to be Ricky Steamboat and Barry Windham against the Enforcers, but Barry Windham was dealing with an injury at the time. They got around this at Halloween Havoc when they had Arn and Larry Zbyszko slam a card on Barry Windham's leg and allegedly broke his leg. Now the Enforcers, probably one of the most forgotten great tag teams of all time, because obviously when you think of Arn Anderson, you think of Arn and Tully, you think of Arn and Ollie Anderson, you think of the Four Horsemen, but this is probably one of the teams that really gets overlooked. So when Ric Flair left WCW in 1991, kind of left Arn Anderson on his own a little bit, but then he formed a tag team for another guy called Larry Zbyszko. Now Larry Zbyszko, obviously famous for about 10 years earlier, having that legendary rivalry with Bruno Sammartino in the WWF in 1980, was later on was the AWA champion, came back to WCW in the early 90s, and they thought, oh yeah, let's just put these guys together. Arn Anderson, the Enforcer, so let's call them the Enforcers, I guess, there was a solution. So they become a tag team, and a great tag team as well. I mean, Arn Anderson, probably one of the best tag team wrestlers of all time, and yeah, obviously these, along with Steve Austin, Rick Rude and Bobby Eaton, would later form a Dangerous Alliance in 1992, so great tag team. So with that being said, now this match is on. Dustin Rhodes was going to do the match, but he needed a mystery partner. Well, it's just great how things work out. I mean, timing's everything in wrestling, really. So at the same time, ex-WCW star Ricky Steamboat was just coming off a lackluster run in the WWF. I mean, a lot of people don't even remember Ricky Steamboat was in the WWF in 1991, but he was in the WWF as a Dragon for probably about a 6-month period, something like that. I think he came in about mid-1991. Yeah, but obviously this is the cartoony era, so he didn't come back as Ricky Steamboat. He came back immediately as a Dragon, changed his look up, did the whole fire breathing, but didn't really do anything of note. I mean, he was on the SummerSlam 1991 card in the opener in the 6-man tag match, and he was going to be on Jim Duggan's team of Survivor Series, but Steamboat decided to quit the company in 1991, not happy with his position. Creative differences, left the company. Then, so obviously when he left the company, he went back to the only other place he could have really, unless he decided to just go to All Japan or New Japan or something, was WCW, which Steamboat hadn't been there for like 2 years. Obviously the 89 stuff with Flair, I'm pretty sure we'll get to that. So time was everything really. Ricky Steamboat was back in the company. There was a spot there to be Dustin Rhodes' tag team partner. Ricky Steamboat was going to fill that spot, I mean, and that was a fucking great idea as well, because Ricky Steamboat, an awesome worker. I mean, it's not understood how much better Dustin Rhodes was for a team with Ricky Steamboat. So you got so it just worked really. The veteran in Ricky Steamboat, the young guy in Dustin Rhodes, just work, and then start of the match, a guy comes out in a dragon suit. Well, that should have been a major clue, but the announcer's acting a bit oblivious to it. With the dragon head and everything, takes off the dragon head. It's Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and wow, the pop of that reveal for Steamboat was absolutely outstanding. I mean, because obviously 1991, slightly different. There was no internet at the time, so imagine if something like this happened now. Someone would have tweeted it out and it would have been retweeted about 100 times. It would be all over the website. Pretty much everyone would have known Ricky Steamboat was coming back to WCW for this spot. So Obviously, a small portion of fans probably knew, but I bet the majority of them didn't. And then we got the match. Oh, this is just classic tag team wrestling. I mean, if you like the stuff the Revival does and all that, I mean, this match is definitely for you. I mean, I just love that old NWA, WCW, 80s, early 90s tag team style wrestling with the heels cutting off half the ring, the babyface fighting back, trying to tag his partner, constantly getting thwarted by the heels, pull them back. Just great stuff. And then obviously Steamboat eventually getting tagged in. The pace was insane as well, like absolutely insane. And the match wasn't that long. It was probably a little bit more than 10 minutes, to be honest with you. I'm not sure of the exact match length, but it's definitely under 15 minutes. I can say that with certainty. And it's probably one of the best tag team matches of all time. I mean, it really is, and I think not enough people talk about it. They really don't. But I think this match is absolutely amazing, and probably one of those matches I bet a lot of people haven't seen before. So if you after this video, if you go and watch that match, then I would say definitely recommend you doing that. Just great match, absolutely awesome match, and of course with Steamboat coming back to the company and there being a big reveal and all that, Dustin and Steamboat went over to become the WCW Tag Team Champions. Great stuff, absolutely awesome. Coming in number 3, and we're going all the way back to the original Clash of Champions. Clash of Champions 1, March 1988, for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Ric Flair versus Sting. I guess you could say maybe the most famous Clash of Champions match ever. Not necessarily the best way. I don't think it was the best, but yeah, probably the most famous one. So let's get into a little bit of a explanation of how the Clash of Champions even came to be. So way before the Monday Night Wars of the 1990s, there was another wrestling war going on, and that was between WWF Vince McMahon and Jim Crockett Promotions. So when Vince took over the world in 1984, most of the territories died off, but Jim Crockett Promotions was able to survive and even kind of compete with Vince a little bit. Obviously not full on, but Crockett definitely held his own for a little while there, and then this all led to the infamous Starrcade 1987 incident where Crockett decided to go to pay-per-view. Then Vince McMahon fucked over the pay-per-view companies, threatening to pull WrestleMania 4 is the Starrcade as long as WrestleMania, as long as Survivor Series 87. So Vince basically created Survivor Series to counteract Crockett, and it worked as well. And then he pulled another stunt in early 1988 when Crockett went for his second pay-per-view, the Bunkhouse Stampede. Vince countered that by going head-to-head in the USA Network with this little show called the Royal Rumble. So yeah, that's right, the Royal Rumble started off as a TV special to counter out Jim Crockett Promotions. So I guess Crockett thought, well, let's go tit for tat here. You're going to counteract me, I'm going to counteract you. So when WrestleMania 4 came around in late March 88, Crockett aired on free television, mind you, on TBS, this little show called Clash of the Champions, a 2-hour special, going head to head with the WWF WrestleMania. And it actually drew a really great rating, and a lot of people think if it wasn't for that show, WrestleMania 4 would have drew a bigger buy rate, but who knows. But I imagine at the time it was an awesome time to be a wrestling fan. And obviously the first Clash of the Champions was a fucking awesome show. Easily the best Clash show ever. Hell, one of the best free television shows ever. I mean, there's 2 other matches on this show that were considered for the list. Lex Luger and Barry Windham versus Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. And the opening match of the Midnight Express versus the Fantastic. But the main event was set for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. The champion Ric Flair at the time, who obviously no need to talk about how great Ric Flair was in the 1980s, absolutely legendary, against this young man called Sting. Now at the time, I can't really think of a match that made a start any more than this match made Sting. So at the time, Sting had been in the company for a few months. I mean, Sting had been around the business for about 3 years at that point. He was one of the guys that came in when Crockett acquired the UWF in 1987. Other notable guys that come through from that still was Dr. Death Steve Williams, Rick Steiner, Eddie Gilbert, I think Michael Hayes was in that as well. But really, Sting was the one who got the opportunity. And here we are, all of a sudden, Sting gets in a little ride with Ric Flair and gets this spot here at the main event, the Clash of Champions. Now at the time, Sting was over, yeah, but I don't think it was like hugely over, like, wow, this guy's going to be the guy going forward. I mean, a lot of people thought he was just a good babyface. So obviously when the match started, we get the match. Yeah, this match is just fantastic. So what they were going to do, they were going to have a classic world title draw that Ric Flair was famous for. But of course, with it being television time restricted, so I think originally they were going to have a 1 hour time limit draw, but because of television time, they had to tone it down to a 45-minute time limit draw. So that was the whole crack. It was just going to be a 45-minute time limit draw. And this match is awesome, like absolutely awesome. I mean, it was paced so well. I mean, just excellent stuff. I mean, because at the time Sting was still relatively green. He wasn't really that good of a wrestler, but I think he did a good job of keeping up with Ric Flair. Because let's face it, Ric Flair was carrying this match. He really was. Because Ric Flair was a veteran, Ric Flair was a leader in the ring and all that. And he was just guiding Sting through an absolute masterpiece. So, well, I love watching Flair's old, longer matches. Because Flair usually gets beat up in the beginning. The babyface wears him down and all that. Then the babyface will make a mistake, and then Ric Flair will slowly wear him down, usually attacking his legs and things like that, and then Ric Flair get the advantage. But the babyface stays in the fight. The babyface will make a little bit of a comeback, and towards the end it looks like, oh shit, Ric Flair's going to lose the world title here, and then Ric Flair managed to hang on just enough for the time that run out. So, and this kind of what happened here. I mean, it was pretty much on that vein. I mean, I just love everything about this match. So we're getting out the last few, because you can see the fans getting more and more into Sting as the match was wearing on. Because I guess at the start of the match, I think a lot of people didn't really think Sting was going to win the world title, but the match was so good and so exciting that it was like, oh shit, Sting might actually pull this off. And then obviously Sting had proved himself in this match, so he was getting more and more over. Then we're getting towards the end, last few minutes. Because what was great about this, he had J.J. Dillon in the shark cage, because at the time J.J. Dillon was a horse's manager, constantly getting involved in matches and all that. So this is going to be a one-on-one match. Eventually Sting gets a Scorpion Deathlock on Flair. It's like, oh shit, but the time's running out, and then the bell rings, and Ric Flair did not submit, so time runs out. Then we get to a time limit draw. So unfortunately, the time ran out with Sting, and he couldn't quite win the NWA title. But I think Sting was made tonight, because I think after this everyone's like going on about Sting this, Sting that, Sting everything. Sting was the guy in everybody's lips, and of course NWA, WCW management took notice of this, and then after this they groomed Sting to be the top guy going to the 1990s. And then that's exactly what happened. 2 years later, the Great American Bash, Sting got that big win. He defeated Ric Flair to become the NWA champion. But that's another story for another time. But this was the start of one of the most famous rivalries in WCW history. I mean, from here, pretty much at the end of the company, Ric Flair and Sting battled each other on and off for years. I mean, there was another big clash match between these two back in 1994. The WCW and the WCW International Heavyweight Championship Unification match. The Great American Bash match, Starrcade 89, that was a main event there, all the way to the very, very last Nitro, and Ric Flair and Sting finished out that show. And just ironic really that the main event, the first Clash of Champions in 88, and then they had the very last match in WCW in history in 2001. But yeah, just fantastic rivalry, awesome match, definitely check it out. Coming in at number 2, 2 letters, 5 words, I Quit. Ric Flair, Terry Funk, Clash of Champions 9, New York Knockout. This is one of the greatest matches in pro wrestling history. Definitely easily one of the best matches of the 1980s. This match is a true classic. At the time, 2 of the greatest of all time are Ric Flair and Terry Funk in a big main event, in a big gimmick blow-off match, the I Quit match. This rivalry was absolutely amazing. This of course follows on from the Ric Flair-Ricky Steamboat rivalry, so in 1989, simultaneously back to back, Ric Flair had arguably the two greatest feuds of his entire career. The one with Ricky Steamboat, and then following that an equally legendary one with Terry Funk. Now maybe as a wrestling feud this wasn't as good as a Steamboat feud, but as far as characters and promos, I dare say it was even better. I mean, just the chemistry between these two, it was just off the chart. This was on the times Ric Flair was a babyface for this one. I mean, I think Ric Flair was a good babyface, but obviously he was a truly amazing heel. And I think after a certain point of his career, fans just loved him anyway. But back in the 80s, I mean, he was a face from time to time. I think most notably the Harley Race feud in 1983, Flair for the Gold at Starrcade. And speaking of that, I will probably, maybe in November time, probably do a Fave 5 Starrcade matches. But well, anyway, and then I think in 85 he was feuding for Ivan and Nikita Koloff as babyface. And this one right here, I think, when I think of Ric Flair's work as a babyface, I'll probably go back to this feud. So this feud started back at Wrestle War 89. Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat finally completed the trilogy. Ric Flair defeated Ricky Steamboat to win back the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, I believe. Officially, this made him a 6-time world champion at the time, but we don't need to get into the debate of when and how many times Ric Flair really was the NWA World Champion. Another time, because they try and make it look like a legitimate sport, because the last match between Flair and Steamboat ended in controversy. And they were thinking if it goes for time limit or something like that, we've got 3 ringside judges. I think one was Pat O'Connor, the other one was Lou Fez, 2 former NWA champions from the very early days of the NWA, and the third one was a really interesting one, and that was Terry Funk, who had he'd even retired a couple of times by this point. I mean, because later I think Terry Funk and retirement became a running joke. Terry Funk probably has the record for most wrestling retirements ever, but he first retired in 1983, and then he came back with the WWF in about 1985, 1986, and then disappeared again at some point. But he was back in wrestling with the NWA in 1989, initially as a commentator. As a matter of fact, in the Flair Steamboat Classic Champions match, Terry Funk was commentator for that. So at this point, I mean, there was a running gag about Terry Funk being old in the 1990s, but here in 1989, he was like 45 years old then. So even then, Terry Funk was getting out in age, but it didn't really matter. Terry Funk was pretty much awesome for most of his career. I mean, I always consider Terry Funk the best old wrestler ever, because of his work in the 1990s and stuff like that. So yeah, he was a ringside judge for this one. At the end of the match, Jim Ross was interviewing Ric Flair, and then Terry Funk came in, was complimenting Ric Flair, saying, you know what, if that went to a time limit draw, I would have definitely voted for you, because I think you're the greatest wrestler in the world, and you might be the greatest NWA champion of all time. Then it was like, thank you, Terry. And then he makes a remark about, you know, I might go ahead and maybe challenge it for the NWA title, because of course Terry Funk, former NWA champion back in the 1970s, and then Ric Flair and Jim Ross kind of blew it off by saying, you know what, Terry, we have a top 10 contenders list here in the NWA. You've been out in Hollywood for the last couple of years. You're not a contender. And then Terry Funk kind of like laughed it off, going, yeah, you know what, I was only joking about challenging you and all that. Then after that, Terry Funk then turned into a madman, attacked Ric Flair, like viciously beat him down, like absolutely awesome beat down. He was like screaming, he doesn't think I'm good enough. He doesn't think I'm a contender. And then really one of the most iconic moments of that era, Terry Funk pile drove Ric Flair on the timekeeper's table. I mean, this just didn't happen in the 1980s. I mean, of course, later on, when ECW and the hardcore era of the 1990s, we saw people breaking tables all the time. The tables get breaking all the time today, but back then, the only other time I can remember this happening, someone going through a table, was in Harley Race trying to do a flying headbutt and Hulk Hogan through the table on Saturday Night's Main Event and missed. But yeah, just awesome moment. So they did the whole thing where now Ric Flair was injured and now he's Terry Funk had broken Ric Flair's neck. He had the whole neck brace on, the whole 9 yards. Then he was coming for Terry Funk, and just some of the promos, really. I mean, Terry Funk's promo work's absolutely outstanding. He was a great heel in this era. He even brought back Gary Hart to be his manager. Just great stuff. And then this led to Flair coming back to the ring for the Great American Bash in '89, having that big main event of Terry Funk, but certainly nothing was settled between the two. And for a little while to keep the feud going, it was morphed into a tag feud. Terry Funk was aligned with the Great Muta, and Ric Flair was aligned with Sting, so old enemies reuniting for this show, for this little feud. And then this, of course, led to the first Halloween Havoc in October of '89, that big Thunderdome cage match with Ric Flair and Sting versus Terry Funk and the Great Muta. But the Flair-Funk rivalry had to be settled one way or the other. Now, in my humble opinion, I honestly feel like they should have dropped the whole Iron Man concept for Starrcade and had this match be the Starrcade '89 main event. I mean, do you know what? Sometimes I consider rebooting some WCW shows. Sometimes, I mean, if anyone actually wants me to do that, comment in the section below. And when I think about rebooting Starrcade '89 quite often, because I just feel like drop the Iron Man concept and do Flair versus Funk as a main event, and maybe do Sting versus Lex Luger as a semi-main event, and you got an awesome show. But they didn't wait till Starrcade. They blew it off in November of 1989 in Clash of the Champions, and basically an I Quit match. I mean, this was it. I mean, because this is back when gimmick matches were a lot more rare than they are nowadays. So I Quit match is a really simple concept. You beat your opponent up to the point where your opponent says, "I quit" in the microphone. I mean, I think that's as decisive as a win you can get. I mean, yeah, pinning your opponent's satisfying and all that, but getting your opponent to say that he quits pretty much makes you the better man. So, yeah, so this match is great brawl. I mean, what I loved about it kind of took Flair out of his formula. But obviously, as great as all the Ric Flair's classic matches were, most of them follow the same Ric Flair formula. I mean, if you see one Ric Flair match, you pretty much know how a Ric Flair match goes. But this one was different. This was a gritty fight. This was a brawl. I mean, Terry Funk forced Ric Flair to fight for his life out there. Just an absolutely awesome match, amazing psychology. Great stuff. I absolutely love this match. This match is absolutely amazing. Just the work the two put into that match was just absolutely fantastic. And a great finish. Ric Flair gets a microphone, figure four leg lock on Terry Funk. The microphone's in his face. Terry Funk's saying no. Then he's like, "Oh yes, my leg's breaking. I quit, Flair. I quit." So babyface Ric Flair gets his revenge on Terry Funk after all this time. But just great ending to the match. Great match. And I believe Terry Funk disappeared again after this. Not sure why. I guess maybe they thought, well, Terry Funk's older, he's done his job, he's put Ric Flair over. Then Terry Funk kind of went back into doing nothing for a while. But just a shame. I would have loved to have seen Terry Funk stick around, maybe into 1990, 1991 era. Just a shame, really. I would have liked to see. Yeah, because Terry Funk was 45 years old, but he was a 45-year-old man that was better than most people on the roster at the time. It just would have been nice to see what could have became of Terry Funk after this had he stuck around. But yeah, this is just an awesome match, absolutely awesome match. And the least surprising number one ever. I mean, come on, guys, what did you think it was going to be? Number one, Clash of Champions 6, 2 out of 3 falls of the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, 1989. Ric Flair, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I mean, come on, guys. Did anyone really expect anything else? I mean, of course this is going to be number one. I mean, I have talked about this rivalry quite a bit in here, so I'll try not to babble on too much. But so Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, 1989. For me, the greatest series of matches of all time. I mean, it took wrestling like 27 years. No, not 27. Hang on, another thing. 28 years, I believe it was, for me to even consider that another trilogy of matches were as good as this, and that was the Kenny Omega versus Okada series in 2017. And And if you think that series is better, then fair enough. I mean, it's all about opinions and all that. It doesn't really matter. But for me, I can't go past this rivalry at all. I mean, so this really started. Obviously, late 88, Ted Turner buys Jim Crockett Promotions. The NWA becomes WCW under new management. And then WCW, they need something different. Ric Flair, I think Ric Flair was still the NWA champion at the time, but I think they were holding off Sting till later on. They were going to make Sting the world champion down the line. So Ric Flair really needed a new opponent, and he got a new/old opponent, if that makes sense. So he brought Ricky Steamboat, came back to WCW NWA at the very start of 1989. I mean, Steamboat had been away from the company since early 1985, was in the WWF for a good 3 years, of course, most notably having that classic WrestleMania 3 match with Randy Savage. Left the company shortly after WrestleMania 4, and I guess was kind of semi-retired at the time. I don't recall Steamboat doing anything in wrestling in between his WWF stint and coming back to WCW. Maybe had some independent matches here and there, but I think he was mainly at home being a dad, running one of his gyms and all that sort of thing. So I don't think he was officially retired, he just wasn't really doing anything, but he was enticed to come back to wrestling to resume his classic feud with Ric Flair. Now, I say the classic feud because this feud goes all the way back to the late 70s in Jim Crockett Promotions back in Charlotte. When Ricky Steamboat came into the territory as a young babyface, was wrestling another young cocky champion, Ric Flair. And Ric Flair's always insisted the matches that they had in the 70s were better than the ones of 89, but of course they were never captured on film. But I would love to see a full version of some of those Flair Steamboat matches in the 1970s, I really would. And then they pretty much wrestled on and off after that, even back when Flair was the NWA champion. I mean, the notable match I remember is the NWA Boogie Jam in 1984. Yes, that was genuinely the name of the show, Boogie Jam. That match was recently uploaded to the WWE Network in the Hidden Gem section. And I saw this match for the first time in years. And that 1 hour draw is absolutely amazing, actually. You want to check this out. So, how Ricky Steamboat came back to the company is Eddie Gilbert was feuding with Ric Flair and Barry Windham. Then a match on television. It's similar stories to what I was telling before, really. There was a match on television, Barry Windham and Ric Flair versus Eddie Gilbert and a mystery partner. So there you go. I talked about Steamboat being a mystery partner in 1991, but he also came back to the NWA as a mystery partner in 1989 as well. And in that match, Ricky Steamboat pins Ric Flair in the tag team match. And then a big match was set. Steamboat was coming back to wrestling to do the one thing he'd never done, and that was become the NWA champion, because at the time he'd been WWF Intercontinental Champion, he'd been United States Champion, I'm pretty sure he'd been Television Champion, maybe he hadn't. We held various regional titles, he held the NWA Tag Team titles a lot, most notably with Jay Youngblood in the mid-1980s, but he'd never been the World Heavyweight Champion before, and this is what he's coming back for. Then the match was set for the Chi-Town Rumble in Chicago, and I believe this was February of 89. Flair and Steamboat was the main event, and I think to surprise a lot of people in the first match, Ricky Steamboat beat Ric Flair to become the NWA champion. It was a really cool moment. Now, I think it's obvious Ricky Steamboat was never a long-term world champion. He was awesome in the ring. I mean, personally one of the best I've ever seen. But as a character in a promo, he was so he wasn't bad on the microphone, but I think it was a bit generic and all that, the family man and all that. And obviously a big rematch was set, because going with what we did last year when Clash of the Champions went up against WrestleMania 4, they were going to do it again, this time in early April of 89, going head to head with WrestleMania 5. And I believe this was the last time the WWF and WCW, NWA, whatever you want to call it, went head of each other in any capacity. Because I think the cable companies put a stop to it after this. Well, yeah, they would have built a big rematch. Ric Flair, the former champion, was going to go for his title back this time in a 2 out of 3 falls match. So, And there we go, this big match was set for the world title on free television. Now what I loved about this is in kayfabe wise, the NWA putting this, or WCW, whatever you want to call them, putting this match on early in the card, because the commentators were talking about having standby matches. I think there was a US title match and a television title match on standby, because they were saying if we have time, because the commentators saying they anticipate this match maybe going the 60-minute time limit, or at least go long. So they thought, well, because the idea was they put this match early in the card and say it went 30 minutes or whatever it was, they had other matches on standby, so just little things like that make it seem a bit more real, because I think it's one of those ones where if you put it on this early, I think it's obvious it was going to go the time limit, so NWA was saying, yeah, we think this might go the time limit, so in case it does, we're going to put this match on now, and if we have time to show you these matches later, we'll put them on. And I'm assuming those matches were dark matches after this went off the air. I don't know, it probably was, but anyway, let's get the match. This match was close to perfection, to be honest with you. I mean, this is for me anyway, probably the best wrestling match I've ever seen. I mean, I didn't watch this match till like 2004 when the Ric Flair DVD came out. I just feel like if I was a wrestling fan in 1989, this probably would have been my favourite match of all time. Absolutely awesome, just outstanding. You had two of the greatest of all time, Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat, in the primes at the same time, which was just awesome. Equally, you had amazing babyface of Ricky Steamboat and amazing heel of Ric Flair. And yeah, just everything about the selling, the psychology and all that, just the way they did things, the little things that they did make it look more realistic and all that, and just the chops and all that, just fantastic stuff. And in about 19 minutes or so, Ric Flair wins the first fall with a big roll up on Ricky Steamboat. And even if that was the match, if that was a 1-fall match, I think that match would have been awesome. But the fact he went on and continued was just fantastic. Then eventually, Ricky Steamboat works on the shoulders of Ric Flair, just really beats the crap out of him, and then puts Ric Flair in a double arm chicken wing, lifts him up. Then Ric Flair submits, so now it's 1-1. And I think this was about 38 minutes, something like that. Maybe 40 something minutes, I don't know. So we're getting to the end. So at this point, I think it seemed pretty obvious that they were going to go for the time limit draw between the two. Flair had won a match and Steamboat had won one, so they're going to go a 1-hour draw. And I feel like they did a magnificent job of making people think that. And then I think this is a genius move. They swerved everybody and had this match end around the 55-minute mark, so everyone thought it was going to go the time limit draw, and it nearly did, but not quite. So in what was a controversial finish, Ricky Steamboat went for the one-arm double-arm chicken wing again. This time, though, his legs kind of buckled, but they fell back, and then Ric Flair had Ric Flair in a pinning position. But the referee counted the three. However, the referee missed that Ric Flair's foot was underneath the rope, so Ricky Steamboat wins the match, but he said he did not win this match decisively because Ric Flair's foot was underneath the rope. So that, of course, led to the big Wrestle War match in May of 1989 in Nashville. So it was a great finish, and just left it open for a further match down the line, which we may talk about another time, but for now we're going to leave it at that. So that's another Fave 5's done and dusted, Clash of the Champions coming up. So yeah, basically, I don't know when the next Fave 5 is going to be, nor do I even know what it's going to be about, to be honest with you. I mean, I'll try and think of something, but if anyone has any suggestions, put them in the comment section below. And until next time, guys, peace.